Well, good evening, everyone. We are so glad to be able to come together to just have a casual conversation. And our focus tonight, I don't want to say our topic, but our focus tonight is the holidays. The holidays are here upon us. And it's the most wonderful time of year that people can get together with friends and family and gift giving and swapping and Santa Claus and the birth of Christ and all of those things that make us smile. But the reality is, it's not the most wonderful time of year for everyone. There are people who really struggle sometimes this time of year, really struggle, an emotional roller coaster for people. And when you add the pandemic, the COVID-19 on top of that, where are people? And we just want to have a conversation about that. And we have an illustrious panel here. And first, let me say, I guess it's not first now, but I'm Dennis Garden with the Georgia Firefighters Burn Foundation. And Mackenzie and I are glad to host a group of folks on here where we can just have a conversation for a little bit and hope that someone is inspired or encouraged by the conversation. And we encourage you to log in on the chat if you've got any questions. We don't promise to get to it or any comments, and we want you to feel free to do that. And I think to start off, let me pitch it over to my partner in crime, my compadre, Mackenzie.
Well, hello, good evening. Thanks for joining us. It is an honor to be here. This is our very last GFBF Talks for 2020, which feels like a celebration to say we've made it to the end of this year. So I'm just honored to be here, and I'm glad to join in the conversation with this wonderful group of people.
Yes. And okay, Dr. Felicia, you're doing a self-intro.
Good evening, everyone. Thank you for the invitation to be here. I really appreciate it. I am Dr. Felicia Berry Mitchell. I go by Dr. Felicia, and I'm a psychologist here in Georgia. And my specialty is trauma. And again, happy to be here. Happy holidays, everybody.
Okay. Sarah. I almost said Dr. Sarah, but Sarah.
Not yet.
Okay.
I am Sarah. I am a licensed clinical social worker and currently working with cancer patients at the Winship Cancer Institute at Emory. Glad to be here.
Great. And I'm going to pitch it over to you, Paul, last but not least, because you're outnumbered by a female populace here. Yes. But I got your back, buddy.
Yeah. Well, good evening, everybody. Paul Schwartzman from Rochester, New York, upstate New York. And this is my second of these talks for 2020, and grateful to be invited and partner with all of you, and Mackenzie and Dennis, who I've had the privilege of working with, and Dennis particularly for a number of years now. I'm the executive director of the Finger Lakes Regional Burn Association, which is a small nonprofit. It's a pretty full service association, doing summer camp, SOAR program, individual family therapy, young adult retreat, which I partner with Mackenzie and Dennis on, adult service. We run an ongoing support group at the hospital when we can go into the hospital, not right now. So it's been involved in the burn community for, that'd be somewhere around 20 years now. And I also maintain a private practice, general private practice here in upstate New York.
Okay. Well, again, on behalf of the foundation, thank you all for being here. And I can't believe that this is our 8th episode of GFBF Talks. And, I think that with this being the last of 2020, this was such an important focus to have a conversation on. This was born out of us recognizing some of the issues of isolation and loneliness and social distancing and all those things. And it puts people in a different place. It could be up, it can be down, it can be to the left or the right. And you guys and I'll use the term mental health professionals or helping professionals, what are some of the things that you see or you personally feel this time of year when you add COVID and all of these things on top of the holiday season where people are struggling financially as well? There's a lot of things going on. And I would just like to pitch it out there for someone, any of you to respond. Where do you find people this time of year?
Well, I guess I'll jump in. Big question, Dennis, but I guess I'll start out with myself. And unlike anything I've said I've been in the burn community for about 20 years, but I've been in the mental health community for about 40 years. So, and I have to honestly say, I have never seen anything like this in my career. It's the level of demand and need is amazing. I mean, again, and even personally, it's a unique time. I'm in that high risk age group, so the fact that we have a pandemic going, which none of us have ever experienced, is just it's this kind of overlaying thing that's this kind of big and truly threatening, and this kind of looming out there. So we just add that level of dread or threat on top of all the other kind of dynamics we've been going on too. And as you say, the holiday season, which certainly is full of lots of wonderful and joyful things, but comes with lots of other expectations of family and the rules we have about what that's supposed to be for us. And then now that further complicated by the pandemic and the limitations of being able to do that, or if you choose to do it, the level of threat involved in that or consequence involved in that. So it's again, I actually lost my grandmother, who I didn't know. This was my father's mother in the 1918 influenza epidemic.
Wow.
So it's got even a more personal kind of sense of threat to it. It really happens, and people are getting close, and that's a quick answer. But just the level of demand is truly unlike anything we've ever seen before.
Anyone else like to add to that, what Paul's talking about?
I think for me, working with cancer patients, I see an overwhelming amount of sadness and the grieving of what they're used to. With them being in an already immunocompromised position, they are not able to necessarily, we're already in a position where they're saying isolate, right? So for them, it's like they're like in over isolation. I've got people calling me and they're crying because their doctor told them it's not safe for you to travel right now. They may not have family in the area, may not be able to host gatherings like they're used to. And if they live alone or it's just them and one other person, they're grieving like ability to be close this season and see their loved ones, and they're kind of exhausted from Zoom or FaceTime or those types of things, and they're missing that physical touch. And I think that's really what I'm seeing, a loss, that feeling of loss.
How important is the physical contact? Because I think we hear that a lot about isolation, social distancing, and this is for the group. How important is physical contact?
I think it varies on the person, right? So for some people, touch is everything. And for others, it is a no-no, especially if you've experienced trauma. The idea of touch, especially uninvited or unexpected touch, can be unsettling. But in terms of if you are anticipating a touch from a loved one, it can be the thing that comforts you from a really, really bad day. It could be the thing that helps you feel understood. That's a nonverbal. So depending on the person and the situation, it could mean the very difference between comfort and peace and, out of your skin experience. It just depends on the situation, I think.
Is it more difficult because it's forced upon you? And what I mean by that, you said personal touch that you don't really want, but the personal touch you want, and now the world says you can't do it. Does that make it more dramatic, more traumatic?
Yes, it's like well, you guys may not understand from a personal experience, but having been a mom or being a mom, being pregnant, and it's like the people touching your stomach uninvitedly. You're like, don't touch me, right? But now you want to be touched because most of us, are isolated in some ways. Even if you're in the home with your family that you created, the idea that if you see a friend, you might be used to giving that embrace, but now it's kind of like that, that far, like a Frankenstein kind of hug thing. So it's the absence of that sense of warmth and the comfort of, someone that you care about. But it can be very unsettling if it's somebody that you don't know what, like the idea of, okay, so if I'm practicing the guidelines outlined by the CDC, but you aren't, and I don't know that, it can be kind of like tenuous, like, I don't know if I really want to touch you. I might want to touch, but I don't know if that's going to expose me to greater risk of harm
Mhm.
beyond that brief embrace. So,
And is that
I
something
think-
oh, go ahead.
Like I say, because we're talking about literal the concept of touch, and if we go back to the old psychological experiments with the rhesus monkeys from decades ago, if we really in the absence of touch, it can be very serious. But I think a lot of what I'm seeing, and I think a lot of what we're talking about is that we don't have to be focused on actual touch, but I think it's the absence of presence.
Mm.
We can't be even in the to make us in the same room, the same place. There's this imposed distance, because I don't mind the elbow bump if that's the best we're going to do, but the idea that we can't sit together. I mean, I'm sure we'll talk about it tonight, but I am grateful for this, as tired and sick as we are at Zoom, but what a blessing at the same time. I mean, this is really cool. I'm sitting here with my folks in Georgia. I mean,
Mhm.
that's a gift at the same time, but I think that the actual loss of proximity and and connection and just presence, I think is very challenging for a lot of
Yeah,
people.
and kind of aside from the pandemic and the social distancing, like Dr. Felicia, you said, when you're pregnant, people just take liberties to touch your stomach,
yes.
because somehow that's kind of okay because I'm celebrating with you. So I just want to see if I can feel the baby kick. But on the other spectrum, and I want to toss this to Mackenzie, on the other spectrum, having a baby during the pandemic
Mhm.
and not having the opportunity to let people hold the baby, to go around. What's that like, Mackenzie, on the other end?
Yeah, it's really hard. I have had to grieve a lot this year because of the loss of a lot of things that seem so small and not like in the, in the larger scheme of things, we're healthy, and we're able to work from home. But the reality is there's a lot of loss that's happened for us this year. And it's personally been really difficult for me. Motherhood is a wild ride. And it has been, this has been without a doubt the hardest year of my life for a lot of reasons. And
Just a little bit of the backstory, Mackenzie, for those who don't know, if you can kind of explain.
Yeah, for sure. Sorry. So I went out on maternity leave January 31st and never rolled back into the office. My husband is a firefighter, and we actually met at camp through working when I was a volunteer, and he was too, before I came on full-time staff. So we kind of have, it's a lot of layers going on. Early on, we had, when everything shut down, we had a 6-week-old baby, and it was terrifying for my husband to go to work because nobody knew, like, could he bring it home? We had multiple layers of plans of how he would quarantine, what we would do. But as new parents with a 6-week-old, it was like, I couldn't imagine not having my husband home for 14 days. And that was, if he didn't get sick and just needed to, kind of stay away. So yeah, it's been a really intense year for us. And I know it is for a lot of people. And I think one of the things that has really helped me through this, as strange as it is just knowing that I'm not alone, like listening to other people share like their own frustrations, even if it's just like, man, I just really want to go hug all my friends. I mean, we have tons of family who still haven't seen our baby. I have all of my friends. I think Dennis saw her, I think she was like 7 months old when Dennis saw her for the first time, and she's almost 11 now. And so it's just like my people, my community of people still haven't met this thing that they were a part of from the journey that they've been on with us. It took us quite a bit of time to have her. And so it's just like all that stuff that seems so small and like, oh, it's not that big of a deal. But in reality, like it is a big deal. And I think that like, I know that's been hard for me, and I know it's been hard for other people, to just to not celebrate your high school graduation. We've had family members that passed that we haven't been able to grieve and have a funeral for, and just these things that you normally do in life to kind of set the experience, and then you can kind of move from there, and how you start whatever process it is or that next step. And just never being able to kind of get there. You try to do it on Zoom or you try to do it via FaceTime, but that feeling that you get and how you have that experience is it's just not the same as much as you want it to be.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And I feel you and I hear you, but as mental health professionals, you guys you're not allowed to have your own stuff, are you? Because you're the ones that people come to for help. You're the ones providing those comforting words. You're the ones that are giving that advice. So you don't need any help, or you don't have stuff, do you? And I think this is important to talk about too, because I think we take for granted that the helping professionals, like firefighters or like you guys as mental health professionals, you're the ones that are called. You're the ones who come to bring the help. You're not the one who needs help, are you?
Everybody needs help.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Human, we need help. And the idea is that if you're not a human being in that room or wherever you are at fireside or wherever you might be helping somebody, there's no sense of you being present. If you can't be human first, regardless of your credentials, your degrees, how many years you've experienced working in the field, whatever it might be, if you're not a human being first and can't, like when Mackenzie started, I heard her voice crack and my heart just ached for her. That as a human being, no matter how many times I've heard trauma stories, that touched me. And when I'm no longer touched or affected by somebody else's stuff or even my own stuff, I don't need to do this work. I mean, that's just the reality of it. And yeah, we all have our own stuff. So the holidays, I love this time of year. But I was thinking about my mom the other day, who's no longer here. My mom has been deceased since 99. And I was just thinking about something. We were talking about baking something. I was like, wow, I wonder how she would see my 3 kids right now, what she would think about our life. And we all have stuff.
And I'm going to wait for a response from everybody on this one.
I mean, I definitely think that I absolutely agree with you. I think that this year, more than any other year, like I feel like I'm really good at like compartmentalizing, not taking my work home with me, X, Y, and Z, but like this has been a year unlike any other. And I think that it is so important to have not only a sense of community, but an avenue for me to turn to when things get too hard, because I feel like if you weren't impacted by this year, I don't know how, because I feel like everybody felt something. And I think just because I have the tools in my toolbox to be able to deal with things maybe better than somebody who comes to me for those things doesn't mean that I don't still seek out therapy, because I do. Doesn't mean that I don't have my, my extra arsenal of coping skills, because I do, because without it this year, I mean, I've had my own moments, my breakdowns and everything this year, but I think that it's been even harder because of that loss of not necessarily my community, but not being able to be around the community that I'm used to lean on when things are really tough.
And I'll add too, Paul mentioned that the kind of like just being overwhelmed with everybody, like even clinicians. So there was a point maybe in the summer, late summer, midsummer, where I was wanting to help the number of people who were seeking help, a lot of people for the very first time, because, even for them, they may have had challenges, but they found a way to deal with them on their own. But 2020 was just the melting pot of a bunch of things colliding at one time. Yeah. So people were coming out seeking therapy, which was great. And I know me and a few of my colleagues who close with and we consult with, just a great support system, were overwhelmed. Like we were trying to see all these people. I was talking to somebody, one of my friends yesterday, and she's like, I have 37 people I see a week. There's no way I could see 37 people a week, just not for my own mental health. And when I had gotten to close to 30 people a week, I had to realize it was affecting my quality of life. Yeah. Like wanting to be a helper and help other people was great, but then it began to affect how I slept, how I interacted with my family. Like I had energy for nothing else because I was so drained. And I've done trauma work as long as I've been in the field. So to be able to compartmentalize or know how to separate work and home, I've done that really well. But this year really taxed me in ways because I was trying to be that helper that people needed. I need to take care of myself first, which we'll come back to that point, hopefully, that self-care is ultimate, but I was trying to do too much and it showed in my life. So
No, couldn't agree more. I appreciate it. Yeah, and you said it, Mackenzie, it's a year of profound loss on many, many levels. And I feel almost guilty, but I think you and I've shared all of this. I have my first grandson this year, who I've seen, I think 3 times all year, but I've seen him 3 times and I'm going to see him tomorrow, which makes me tear up. But I feel guilty saying it, but it's not without, second guessing ourselves over and over again and forcing our daughter to go get tested yesterday. So it comes with this anxiety and this fear. There's that loss of family, that loss of even little things, going out to dinner, going to a movie. It's there's no way not to be vulnerable to it. And like we were saying, the demand is, the issues of self-care and self-compassion that, I have a peer support group. In fact, I meet with them tomorrow morning. That we meet every other week. That's literally to take care of each other and ourselves. And so it's imperative. But at the same time, I think, we are all human, and I don't want to take too much time with it, but I was listening to an interview a couple of months ago with Anderson Cooper and Stephen Colbert. Stephen Colbert lost his brother and father in an airplane crash when he was 10 years old. And he goes around talking about how grateful he is for it. And Anderson Cooper challenged him and went, really? You're grateful? And he said, no, it's a horrible loss. I don't wish anybody losing their brother and their father. But at the same time, he said it's awakened me to the deeper sense of humanity and empathy, and allows me to know and understand you better. And I'm grateful for that. So from that standpoint, I think it's it helps to have that perspective of it.
And I guess looking at it from that perspective, this whole strange, weird, once in a lifetime pandemic kind of thing, there's a lot that can come out of it. And when I asked about caring for yourself, the helper, it's not just being helping professionals, but how many mothers feel that way, taking care of their families? How many fathers who maybe aren't going to work now and concerned, I've got to hold it together because I've got to take care of all of these people. And feeling a sense of shame that I have to ask for help. And that shame keeps people, and I think you said it, Dr. Felice, that more people are reaching out for help now than ever before. And I think that's one of the things that have come out of this pandemic, is that because we're all sharing the same sense of struggle, I don't have to be ashamed because everybody's hurting. And I know from my own experience getting burned as a child, because I was burned in the face when I was discharged, they sent me to see a psychiatrist. And, way back 100 years ago, you go see a psychiatrist when you're crazy. And that's how I perceive it. I said, man, they're making my mom take me to a psychiatrist because apparently I'm crazy. And there were a lot of feelings I was having with what happened to me because I didn't understand it at 14, that maybe I was crazy and they know my secret. But I went and saw this person, and he spent an entire hour session trying to convince me he understood what I was going through. And really, he was trying to create a bond between us. But what he did, he put a wedge there, because as he's talking to me, and I'm a kid, so I'm taught to respect my elders and don't talk back, even though it was rumored that I asked too many questions as a kid. And I'm looking at this guy, and I'm looking at his face and his neck and his arms and his hand, and I'm trying to see a burn scar on him somewhere. And he had none. So you can't possibly know what I'm going through. And to me, I was the only person that experienced it, because the only burn people I saw was in the hospital. But I was the only one they sent home. They kept everybody else there where the burn people live. And I begged my mom not to make me go back. And she didn't make me go back, but I really begged her. And it really turned me off to getting any kind of help. it just turned me off. And it was a terrible, terrible first experience. And it took probably 30 years later that I did go and began seeing a therapist again, because I was asked, I felt that a therapist couldn't help me. They even changed the term. Back then it was a psychiatrist. Then it began to change to a therapist and that kind of thing. And I was asked, well, it may not help you, Dennis, but it won't hurt. And that was a really good sales pitch. I said, what do I have to lose? And I went, and I did not know how much I needed to go. I did not realize that, but I also know that I'm not unique in that experience. There are a lot of people, and I'm wondering, and I'm hoping that maybe there's someone who's listening to this conversation that's questioning whether they should go, you know. And I've learned working with folks like you guys that if you think you need to go, you probably should. if you think that, and it's not always going to see a professional. If I'm ashamed to see a professional, what else could I do? You know, what else? Because I've gone to therapy and I've gotten help, but I've gotten as much or more help from being around people with similar experiences, and that's being involved in the burn community. And I didn't see that coming because I just wanted to help, you know, and I was this expert burn person, so I just wanted to help and didn't know how much I was going to be helped in the process. And even this pandemic, what's been interesting about it is the social distancing. I experienced that because people weren't comfortable with my hands being burned, didn't know if it was contagious. So I dealt with the social distancing, the isolation, you know, spent tons of time by myself. I hid in the house for 2 years, you know, quarantining, self-quarantining, fear. I experienced that, not knowing what the future was going to be like. And these are all things that the rest of the world is experiencing now. And it's like, now you know how I felt and what I went through. I can kind of point my finger. And there's some solace in knowing that maybe people understand a little bit more. But mine was based out of a burn experience. But again, it's not unique. You know, what do people go through that have had them to be in this place? But now there is comfort in numbers, you know, and other people quarantining now and dealing with isolation and dealing with the loneliness, or not being able, you know, going back to Mackenzie, not being able to share your baby with the world, you know, just here, take my baby, hold my baby, and that kind of thing. And I want to come back to you, Mackenzie. How did you guys navigate that, or how have you been, or are you?
I mean, you know, we're making it. I have to be honest, talking about, you know, thinking about needing help as a helping professional. I think we all have that like little voice that says, like, you know, when we were talking about this topic and you asked me to be on the panel, my first thought and that little voice that I try to shove away was kind of like, really? You're going to get on there and talk about helping people? Serious? You know, that little nagging, like, you don't got it together. But I think that what's so powerful about being in this community of people is like, that is a great strength, because you don't have to have it together. You just need to be open and vulnerable to, you know, to share that, like, this is the reality. And I've reflected a lot on how I've been working in the burn community over, I guess I can say over 10 years, even though maybe I don't look it, but I, you know, have had a master class from the people that I've had the opportunity to serve on how to struggle well. And I think that that has been something I've really leaned on, you know, thinking about how so many of our young adults have shared struggles navigating through some of the stuff, Dennis, you're just talking about, some of those things. And so I think that we're taking it day by day. It's hard. I'm a planning person. I like to know, like, how are we going to get from A to B to C all the way to Z? And so, you know, this has really challenged me to figure out how to just, all right, we're just going to make it through today and see, you know, what the next thing holds. And it's so funny when you find yourself saying to yourself what you say to the people you work with, when you find yourself leaning on those different mantras or things that you tell other people. It's just all so interwoven. And I think that I work really hard to keep that little voice small, the little voice that says, like, this is too much. How many Zoom calls have you cried on that have been recorded in public in 2020? But the reality is, I think that it's important to show that, because this is real. You know, this is hard. Being a human doing life is not easy when you're living in this world that we live in anyways.
Right.
And then, you know, just like the people that we work with, when trauma happens in your life, when something happens in your life, where do you go? What do you do? How do you navigate? And so we, you know, I feel fortunate that I've had this masterclass to, you know, learn from so many people around me how they navigated some of the really hard stuff. And so some of it, I think that I'm doing all right about. Others, it's really hard. I mean, it's just, there's so many bittersweet things woven in between it that it's just hard to hold like gratitude and grief in the same space. And that is so uncomfortable, you know, to sit there and say, man, I've had almost a whole year home with my baby, like to be at home. And I'm so grateful for that. And then it's just the grief of the loss, you know, like they just do this a lot of days. And so the days that the grief gets this way, you know, I try to find ways to get the gratitude back this way. And I think that that's just that delicate dance that we do in life, you know, however the season feels. And so I think that this time of year has always been a time of reflection for me. I think going into the holiday season, I try to find a heart of gratitude. And so this year I'm really scraping deep for some of that, just to be honest. And when it's some things like I'm grateful for health today, like that's big, you know, and that's enough.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
But don't grief and gratitude, don't they go hand in hand? Can you have one without having the other? Because if you don't have the grief, do you really recognize the gratitude? Or does gratitude just become a thing, a linear thing if you don't have the grief? So you kind of have to have both, don't you? Yes, no?
The whole yin and yang, right? It's,
yeah.
We can't truly appreciate joy without pain.
Mm-hmm.
I think in general, it's never an either or, it's always a both and. I think it's just been a lot more of that both and this year, just because there's been so many more, at least for me personally, moments of sadness and grief and loss this year. I think it is more of a struggling act to try to balance the two and not feel like the grief is so up here and the gratitude is so down here. So like Mackenzie said, finding whatever little moments I can. So.
Mm-hmm. I thought that was some more profound things coming there.
No.
You know, and I guess in saying that, is that the hope of the new normal? You know, we talk about new normal, you hear that term all the time, the new normal after the pandemic, because things are never going to be the same again. Could the new normal be a deeper sense of appreciation by the masses than there were before? Like with 9/11, everybody loved firefighters right after 9/11. You know, hug a firefighter, give cookies to a firefighter, love a firefighter. But then the more distance that was put between it, okay, they're taking too long to get here. You know, you got back to normal. Is that the thing, the hope that can come out of this pandemic? Or once we get past it, it'll just be that thing we talked about, like what happened in 1918. People don't really talk about it with the heaviness that it really occurred, but it was just that thing. And, you know, do we hold on to it? Or do we become bitter because I lost my job that I've had and I was going to retire from it and the pandemic ended that? You know, I recently was home. I had to go home to Detroit and I didn't see my grandbabies. You know, that was heavy for me that I didn't see my grandbabies. But the responsible thing is, no, you're not going home to do a whole bunch of visiting and having people cook everywhere you go. No, you need to go handle your business and get back to what you're doing. And I still carry the guilt today that how dare I go home to Detroit and not hug and love on my grandbabies. But it's just not the responsible thing to do. And I know that when their mom my son lets them see this GFBF talks, because they didn't know I was home until they probably see this. And I'll look for the FaceTime call, you know, and I'm looking forward to the disappointment, you know, or Papa, you said you love me, how dare. I'm looking for that. But in the largest game, it's about being responsible, and those kind of choices people are making every day. You know, do I get the Christmas presents the way we always do, knowing that we might miss a couple of meals next month, So just don't get the Christmas present. You know, all of those things that people are having to deal with. And it's just very, very an interesting time, confusing time, a time of anger, a time of fear, a time of all of those things all meshed in. And I'm hoping, and Mackenzie and I, we talked about this, I'm hoping us being on here talking about this really speaks to people to let them know that it's okay not to be okay.
Mhm.
It really is okay not to be okay.
Yeah.
And what does that really mean? How, you know, can you guys give it to me? No, you can't. You know, I can only give myself permission to be okay with not being okay. And I like to talk about that a little bit. What does it mean to be okay to not be okay? Just to dig a little bit deeper with that.
Well, I will add, it's okay to not be okay. To me, that means I recognize that I'm not functioning the way I normally might. So maybe I'm not sleeping, eating, I'm more irritable. Maybe, you know, I find it harder to have energy to do things. The things I used to enjoy, I don't want to do. They don't give me that sense of joy anymore, or whatever the case might be. So it's okay to not be okay as long as you recognize you're not okay and you don't allow yourself to stay there. And so
Yeah.
getting back to the idea of self-care, whether you are a helper, a helping professional, a firefighter, a person living in this world, self-care, being able to know what's your temperature, taking an assessment of what you need, where you are, and then recognize, you know what, I'm off today. Okay, maybe I need to say no, put some boundaries in place. No, I can't do the thing that you want me to do. I can't tax myself anymore. I'm just gonna go sit on my couch with a cup of cocoa and watch some comedies or some Christmas movies and just be filled with joy. Or maybe I'll sit and eat a whole pint of ice cream, whatever it is for that moment, but I'm not allowing myself to stay there for days and weeks at a time, because then that can lead to depression. And the depressed mood is one thing, depressed state and depressed disorder is a totally different, there are different variations. But I think at some point, if we are honest, we can all say, I've been sad, maybe even depressed, I've been anxious at some point, but having a disorder is a totally different thing. So you can circumvent that by taking care of yourself and not letting things go too long.
And isn't that a practice? Because
Yes.
as a helping professional, you've got to, like someone said, you've got to have a sense of that as a part of who you are to even choose that profession, to want to help others. But to do that, now okay, I'm not going to do anything today. I'm not answering the phone. I'm going to sit on the couch and I'm going to watch some old movies or cartoons. But now I'm sitting there watching cartoons, dealing with the guilt of saying no. Well, doesn't it take some practice to get there? Because I may be tired from helping, so I'm not going to help, but now I got to deal with the guilt that's a little heavier than it would have been if I had helped in the first place. So doesn't that take some practice and forgiving oneself?
Yeah, that's the whole notion. I think it's talking about some self-compassion and understanding that, and it's okay to not be okay. And I would agree, it's just not get stuck there. And we were all talking tonight about loss and grief. It's real, it's profound. You don't have a choice about it. I think it was somebody, maybe in one of our retreats, I think made the phrase, I think we were together, even Dennis, or somebody made the phrase, said the phrase, there's no way around grief. You can't get around your grief. You have to go through it. I can't remember who said it, but it hit me. It was one of those, wow, that's profound. And I've never forgotten it. I've repeated it 100 times since, but I think it was one of our young adults or somebody like that. So that it, so we have to be what we are, and then have to be able to acknowledge that and to allow it. But like Lisa says, if it's prolonged, if we get stuck there, it can be dangerous. And it's learning those tools to navigate your way through.
Navigate your way through. And how do my experience? This pandemic really connected me back to past trauma. It did, because after I got burned and discharged from the hospital, I'm a teenager. So I've got these burn, I don't want to say disfigurement, cosmetically challenged from the burn scars. And I hid in the house for 2 years. I wouldn't go outside. And here we are 100 years later, and I'm having the staff work remotely from home. I'm working from home because, we're quarantined in. And I couldn't understand why I was so not productive. You know, I was just not, I mean, not even with the working from home, but even some pictures I wanted to hang. I said, oh man, I got time now, I can hang my pictures. And those pictures were just leaning against the wall. And I said, what the hell? I wasn't doing laundry because I don't have to, because I can do it anytime, is what I was telling myself. And I didn't realize it until I was working in the office one day. And I said, I'll leave about 1 o'clock, go to the store, pick up a few things, go home and cook and kind of chill. I didn't leave the office till about 8:30 that night. And I was like, wow, didn't mean to stay in, didn't know I was in here this long. And I realized that when I pulled up into the parking lot of my home, I'm sitting in the car, looking up at my window, not wanting to go in.
Mhm.
And I was like, oh my God. Because when I was looking up at the window of my home, I saw that teenage Dennis looking out the window the same way I was doing when I was a kid. And it struck me. I was like, oh my God, I'm hiding in my room again. And that's what it connected me to. But it wasn't that I was looking for it. I didn't know what it was, but it just hit me and it was so obvious. I said, oh my God, I don't even want to go in, you know, because I'm in isolation again. And I actually reached out to the apartment managers to break my lease because I had to move out of the apartment. I said, I can't be in here. And they were understanding, and I explained the situation to them, did a little in-service with the apartment management and the staff. And I moved into the building next door, same apartment complex, but I just needed to get out of that apartment I was in because it represented that room. And I didn't see that coming. I wasn't looking for it. And again, you know, I share my own personal experience, but I don't share it in the sense that it's unique of where people are and what they're feeling. And I didn't realize how this pandemic had connected me directly back to that past trauma.
Well, I think that is one of the things that makes this more complicated. And, you know, Lisa and all of us are, you know, work with trauma is, you know, it's not, you know, unfortunately, it can be cumulative. And so when we have past trauma and now this new trauma, it's can be very much re-triggering, but you were able to put a context on it, which I think is really important, and recognize that. You also came up with a solution. I mean, I can't tell you, every day somebody's telling me, I don't know why I'm so stressed, you know, or they're describing what you're describing. I don't know what's going on. And the first thing I say is, well, first thing is to be mindful that you are now living day to day, 24 hours a day, in a worldwide crisis. Period. You know, let's start there.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
I think
I
too.
I think it is re-triggering for, oh, sorry, go ahead.
Yeah.
Go
I
ahead.
was just saying, people just don't recognize how big and how heavy that really is. They just got, you know, that's out there. You know, it shouldn't affect me.
I was just gonna say that I think that that is why we've seen such a big uptick in people going to therapy this year more than any other year, because they don't know how to navigate through that grief, and they don't necessarily know how to put context to what they're feeling or how to process those emotions, because this is something that that none of us have dealt with before in our lifetime. But specifically, if you didn't have those tools and you didn't have the thought process or the framework to know how to deal with things that may be triggering you or re-triggering you, I think that is why we're seeing such, you know, an increase in volume in our caseloads, and people in general, just, you know, across the country, across the world, coming to therapy or support groups or whatever it is, because they are trying to navigate this, I don't know if you want to call it a new normal, but what we're in right now, this season that we are in right now, and not knowing when the end is in sight in the season, I think makes it so much harder for so many people.
And I think too, like, you know, I remember early on, Dennis and I had a long conversation about how like that like shut down for a lot of people, you know, like there's so much noise in our life, and like you can go out with friends and you could do like fill in the blank of things you can do to drown out whatever the things are that you really should probably focus on and deal with a little bit. But it's like, no, I'm gonna go to the movies with my friend, or I'm gonna go do this. And like it just ended for people. And like Dennis and I had a long conversation about how that distraction is gone, and how it's bringing to the surface all of the things for, you know, just the conversations I was having in my personal life, not even trying to like get into it. Like we've all been in there where you start talking to somebody and you're like, okay, we're going here. I just was like wanted to get my coffee, but now we're doing this whole thing and that's fine. But it turned into like every conversation like was so deep and heavy because it was like all of a sudden the noise is gone. You can't distract yourself. And so I feel like, it's like we've got like the waves of it is, the roller coaster ride. And like, I know, it's like getting towards the end of the year, like I'm just tired. Like I just, and I think, we've worked remotely for so long and I just think about all of our people, and that weight of that, like thinking of all of the people who are going through the burn and the trauma experience from that and who are going back to a world where they don't have an in-person experience to start to work. And, like there's just all of those unfinished feelings that, the work that we're doing, that all the regular trauma stuff's happening in life, all the other things are going on. So, and then it's just like the layer and the layer, like all that piling. And I think that, it's just, that's where I find myself, and that this conversation has been so refreshing for me to just be among other people willing to say, hey, me too. And I think that is like, that's the power of getting to be together. And we can do that in this way. And it still is powerful. It still feels better in person. It's still, like to touch and hug and just be there. But this, there's a lot of power and hope in these moments to come together and say like, yeah, me too. Like, because it's like a worldwide me too. Like it just feels like, oh, everybody can just say together, like, I get it. I understand. Dennis is not, the psychologist telling you, that he knows how you feel. It's like, no, you guys can look at me and say, I get you, and that's it.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. We got a question. And I guess it's open for interpretation. Someone sent in a question, has anyone considered maybe this is a time to dig a little bit deeper? And I think we've touched on that a little bit.
Yeah, I was going to say that one of the good things, if there is there are good things that have come out of this, is that people are seeking therapy. They do recognize, and I would say, to put it out there that it's okay to not be okay. I like to phrase it, the reality is that we all can use help. And help can look different ways, right? So one of the things about self-care, which is no matter who you are in this life, you need to learn how to take care of yourself first before you're a mother, father, helper, firefighter, doctor, lawyer. Before you put that role on, you have to take care of your person first. And a lot of people don't do that. So when people come to me, whether it's trauma or otherwise, that's one of the things we work on. And it's also learning how to say no, how to put boundaries in place to go back to your question of, what about that guilt and all of that? I learned a long time ago, as much as I love trauma work, the work of healing is not mine to do. So when I take the time off, I'm off. When I go home, I'm home. There, I can count on this maybe 17, whatever plus years that I've done this work where I've thought about, gosh, what is that? But that probably was early on in my career. Not that I don't think about my patients at times, but the idea is I know that they have to do their work. I can help them, give them the skills and the tools. They have to implement them. So when I'm gone and I take time for myself and my family, there's no guilt because that's their job to do their healing. I'm a co-facilitator. I walk alongside them, but it's not my job to do. So the idea of taking self-care, the idea of taking your own inventory. Where am I? You know what? I was really snappy with Dennis today. What's going on? That's not usually how we interact. He might usually quip, and I'm now like taking it personal. Like, what's that about? So doing your work to figure out what you need to do, but taking care of yourself first is so important. I think a lot of us think, no, I have to be that mom, like you mentioned. No, I got to be that daughter. I have to, I should, I'm supposed to. That's all a bunch of stuff that'll keep you stuck and, want to pull your hair out. The other thing I mentioned too is that which we haven't talked about, is the increase of alcohol sales during this year. So people with trauma in general tend to, or people with, with the depression, anxiety, whatever. Now I'm going to mask that with this substance. But we've had an increase in substance use, and I don't want us to forget about that, because this time of year, if you do tend to venture out, it's the holiday party season, right? And what do people do during holiday parties is they consume. And so I would just encourage people to be mindful of their consumption, that if you're feeling some pain or angst, that you deal with that and not use the substance to cover or mask those feelings.
Yeah, I get a shot of Hennessy just because I want to feel better. I just want to be around people. Yeah. Take me a shot or two, and I think that's key. I do a lot of work in the substance abuse community with my younger brother, And one of the things that they're doing this year is somebody made a donation to the organization he works so that all the residents can buy a gift for a family member or someone. And then they went out and they took everybody to put the gift on the porch, whether it was a family member, a friend or something, so that they can think about other people during this holiday season. Being in an addiction, I take. Okay, for this minute right here, you're going to give something. And I thought that was just an amazing process they went through. And it was just pretty cool for that very reason you're saying right there. It's like, okay, this is about me. And giving, it's about the person you're giving to, but it's about me too.
Sure.
And I thought that was a pretty cool thing to do. So yeah, the substance abuse issue. And also, this pandemic gives me a reason to get high. It's like things are crazy. So what do you want me to do?
Yeah.
Sure, I can get it because it legitimizes it. And you can use it either way, for positive or negative. And we as people are very skilled at creating chaos or managing chaos or avoiding chaos. We're very, very skilled at that. And we have about 5 minutes left. This is a very, very quick hour. I can't believe
Yeah, it really is.
our hour has blown.
I was concerned about that question. I don't know if that was a challenge for us to get deeper or whether they were suggesting that this a unique opportunity to, like you were saying, time of reflection and to really, being isolated alone or kind of dealing with these life changes and losses, it can be a time to evaluate and to kind of, well, really, where are my core values? Who's really important to me? What is this? Those are some of the things I am seeing presented. It's people are, some of the people I'm hearing are stuck with each other at home and they're rediscovering each other. Some are discovering I can't stand the son of a bitch, So are you clarifying? Yes, an opportunity. Okay, so you're confirming what I'm saying right now. Thank you. I was just concerned we weren't answering your question. Yeah, so it is a unique opportunity, I think, to reflect and to look and to really kind of take a deeper look at, the kind of where we are in our lives.
And I think looking at our situation is that we're not pleased with it could potentially lead to me taking an honest look at myself, and it's very easier to look at my situation that I'm not pleased with, or the people I'm either with or the people I'm separated from. That is so much easier than taking an honest look at myself. And I think this has created an opportunity for some self-reflection and look at my own me, because I don't want to really look at myself because I might not like what I find, but the beauty, whatever I find, I can address it and I can change it, or I can develop it. And again, we tend to find what we're looking for, and it's very easy to miss. I think, Sarah, I think you said, finding that good, looking for it, yeah, this stuff happens, but looking for the good. And I do truly believe that there are moments of grace every day. When I was in the hospital for 8 months, couldn't see, bandages, I could just hear and smell what was going on in the room, and I can smell the hospital smells, the alcohol, the burned flesh. I could hear people cry. I could hear all these things, and I would get a whiff of some really nice perfume, through all of that. And I would say, "Auntie," and she said, "Yeah, I'm here, baby." Because my aunt, when I was growing up, she had an affinity for expensive perfume, And I always loved when my auntie would come over, because I would give her a big hug and just take a deep whiff just to see what she smelled like. And in the hospital, despite everything that was going on, I got a whiff of some really nice perfume, and I knew my auntie was there. And to me, that was a moment of grace. But it's easy to overlook that with everything that was going on, but that was a moment of grace. And those moments of grace happen every day. And with this pandemic, it's easy to harp on, and the media does the kind of nicey stuff is not really newsworthy, so there's a focus on the panic and the fear and all these other things. But, we're looking at how many people have died from this pandemic, but oh my God, how many people have survived it? The emphasis is not on that. But I would like to, for each of you to take a couple of minutes, just some parting words of wisdom that you might like to share. And we'll just go around because we've got like 4 minutes left, but We're going to start with you, Paul, since we ended with you came in last on the intro, but if you'd like to leave a word of wisdom or
Wisdom, that's pressure. I guess the quick thought I'm having right now is we're talking about, this time of year and the pressure and the demands and the increases we're seeing in terms of mental health. I guess I would say that it's not a constant thing. It's, our well-being, our self-care, I think, Sarah, you said it, we were talking about the good and the bad, grief and joy. These things coexist. Life isn't fair. And so it's constantly striving to kind of find that perspective. And it's a process. It's, I guess we're all works in progress, and we're dealing with unusual times and trying to seek that balance. But, we don't just arrive. We got to kind of keep on.
Right.
Keep on keeping on.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Thank you. Sarah, words of wisdom.
I think it's just important to remember that for whoever needs this, you're not alone. I mean, I think we're all going through this season, whether you are a helping professional or not. I think we're all dealing with these feelings. And I think to Paul's point earlier, you can't work around those feelings, whether that's grief or whatever feelings that may be uncomfortable, those things that we have been forced to sit with this year. You have to find a way to work through and navigate that. And that's going to look a little bit different for everybody, because we all have different ways that we heal and deal with a traumatic experience. But I think just remembering that you're not alone in the process is very important to remember.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Thank you. Dr. Felice.
Self-care and self-love, and taking time for you, not giving into pressure to be and do things that don't sit well with you and your spirit. And take time to appreciate, like you said, be grateful, enjoy that grace. It is there every day. And we just have to take a moment and reflect and be mindful of it. Live in the present moment. If you can live in the present moment, it changes everything, really.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And my partner in crime here, Mac, I think you're the ideal person to wrap this session up.
Thank you. I want to thank all of y'all for your time tonight. This has been has been precious for me to spend time amongst you. Thank you for that. I just think my encouragement, and as Dennis always says, sometimes we just say it for ourselves, is just to keep showing up just as you are, that you are good enough as you are, even if as you are is messy, because it's messy in the middle. Life is messy. As much as I want it to be clean and easy, it's not. It's messy. And so just show up as you are, and that's good enough for you and for your people. And if it's not good enough for other people, that's okay too, because it's okay to just be you. So that's I think that's just as much for myself as it is for anybody else. So yeah.
I on behalf of the Georgia Firefighters Burn Foundation, I would like to thank each of you for not only taking the time to be on this call, but really having the courage to show up and to be here and to share who you are, because that's really what it's about. It's about people being people, and that's it, and dealing with what we have to deal with. And I say it's all good, and at the Georgia Firefighters Burn Foundation, we really want to create as many touch points as we can, because the real foundation of what we do is community. And it's so much more, our tagline is help, hope, and healing beyond the burn. But this year it's evolved into help, hope, and healing beyond the pandemic. That's what it's evolved into. And we want to be that resource. And we only are successful in what we do because of people like you that are willing to show up and be here, and the courage to be vulnerable and to be who you are. And with that, I'd like to say happy holiday, whatever that means to you, for everyone, for you and your families. And we hope that it's enjoyable and it's safe. And let's get excited about 2021, because this just prepared us to launch into a most exciting year next year. So I thank you all, and thank everyone for tuning in. And we send our love and sincere appreciation, and you guys be well. Thanks much.
Well, thank you.
Thank you.
Ta-ta.
So,
Bye.
Bye.
Mhm.